All set? Okay, let me just check with NCTV. NCTV, are you all set? Or are we all set?
All set.
Okay. Diane, are you ready to read the script?
Yep, wait a minute. I gotta grab
Okay.
it.
Oh, sorry.
Hold on just a second.
I'm putting her on the spot.
Uh, all right. Here we go. I'm gonna
Diane?
make this. Yes. Hello.
Is that a red lion amaryllis in the background?
Yes.
Very pretty.
It is pretty. Wait a minute. I just have to get the front page. All right. This is the Friday 1 o'clock meeting for the HDC. It is being recorded on the town website identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folk may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recordings. All supporting materials have been provided members of this body and are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, the chairman, notes otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, please permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold your name until called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and you state your name before speaking. As a preliminary matter, this I am the chair. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipating on the agenda are present can hear me. Members, I will call your name. Val.
Madam Chair, she's not in attendance at the moment.
Okay. We got, is Abby here?
Yeah, I here.
All right. Steve,
Aye.
Johnny McLaughlin,
He is not here.
all right, and Ray's not here yet, right?
But Carrie is here.
Oh, Carrie, hi, sorry. My telephone doesn't have everybody's picture on it. Good morning. This open meeting of the HDC is being conducted remotely and all that stuff. This ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. So I need somebody to,
Madam Chair, you need to address the staff who are here.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course
That's
I
okay.
do. Kathy,
Present.
I'm working without my agenda. Kathy and Holly,
Present.
thank you. So now we seem to have, we'll go to the agenda and then we will see what public comments and people we have on that wish to speak during the meeting. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Abby,
Aye.
Carrie,
Carrie,
Carrie.
Muted, Diane.
All right. Carrie, unmute it if you can. Val,
she's not here yet.
he's not here either. Steve,
Hello?
hi. Hi. So that's three of us. I guess that's enough for a group.
Madam Chair, did you acknowledge Carrie? Because she is here. She just hadn't unmuted herself.
I did acknowledge her. I
Okay.
called her and
Okay.
I told her to unmute, but I did acknowledge her. She was here. So now Kathy, who do we want? How are we going to do this? Start it off. Are we?
Madam
I will
Chair,
defer to Holly.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, if I may, I'd like to introduce our Resilient Nantucket consultant, Lisa Craig and Kimberly Rose. They'll be introducing us into the Toolkit, which is a requirement of the Resilient Nantucket MVP project. And then after Lisa is concluded, then we will be introducing into the Coastal Resiliency Plan by Trevor Johnson from Arcadis. So I'll leave it to Lisa.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Holly. And I'm going to go ahead and share a screen here and just start the presentation. As always, it's great to be in front of the HDC again and look forward to continuing to assist in the Resilient Nantucket work. So just as an FYI, we're making good progress on the design guidelines. I spoke with my colleague Phil Thomason yesterday, and we're all very excited about things moving forward on that product. But as we all know, there is another product, the Resilience Toolkit. And I will go through what Kimberly and I have been working on for the past many months. Just a shout out to Kim. I throw things over the transom all the time. Kim, let's take a look at this resource. And how about this? And, you know, is this dated or should we look for something more updated? So she's done a terrific job of pulling some of this together and developing an annotated toolkit for use on the city's website, as well as what we would like to see moving forward, other creative uses of this product. And I think that at the end of the presentation, that's the type of information I'll be looking for from the HDC and others involved in this project. And also just glad to say that we've got Trevor Johnson from Arcadis working on the Coastal Resilience Plan. And it's great we're here both today because we want to demonstrate to the HDC the integration of this work. So Holly, thanks for making all of that happen as well. I'm going to start out by just a few words of note. First off, whenever we develop this type of a resource that is then put on the city's or the town's website, we have to realize that it needs to be updated. I would dare to say that as we move into a new administration, we'll see a lot of the current links going dead. So as with FEMA websites, EPA websites, Army Corps of Engineers, and all of the other relevant sites are updated with new information in this coming year. We just need to make sure, however that's done, and certainly Kimberly and I will be doing that through the completion of this toolkit, that it is updated regularly, because there's nothing more frustrating than, you know, clicking on a dead link and then you're lost. Looks like Kathy has a question.
Yes, I just want to make a statement that for the record, Val Oliver just joined at 1:15. Thank you.
Terrific. So that is one note I would make. The other thing I would say is that we developed this first resilience toolkit because of the fact that we're looking at a multitude of members and audiences here. Obviously, as you'll see in Trevor's presentation, the communication and partnership opportunities that are afforded through these projects lends us dozens of players in Nantucket that are concerned about issues of sustainability and resilience. So we are trying to have this be kind of a higher level toolkit to start with, addressing audiences of government. Obviously, the town plays a key role in moving forward with adaptation and mitigation strategies, as well as nonprofit organizations, cultural organizations, conservation organizations, individual property owners, architects, builders, real estate agents, insurance providers, and the commissions, obviously, who need critical informational tools to help them make informed decisions. So that's why you'll learn a little bit more about how Kimberly and I approach the organization and content development. So with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with the presentation. Just to give you an update on where we are with the Resilient Nantucket initiative, obviously the MVP grant was awarded. We hope to see more of those MVP grants coming forward based on work already completed. It's a wonderful thing. The town is following their previous plans, hence why these grants are being awarded, and the development of design guidelines and a toolkit were certainly identified as the next step. In the completion of our reports and our design guidance, we will be adding additional recommendations of products that we think will enhance these tools for the community to use. We had Community Forum 1 and addressed issues of flood insurance and why it was so critical to understand flood risk and prepare for it through vehicles such as the National Flood Insurance Program. We then went into the design guidance and took 2 days of community charrette involving the general public, members of CONCOM, CRAC, HDC, and the NHC on this work. We are now at the point of the Nantucket Resilience Toolkit. This is a draft toolkit. We are looking for any additional guidance you all may have to offer before we finalize that particular product. We're moving into, as I mentioned, February, having draft design guidelines available for comment by the HDC and final guidelines in March. And then please put on your calendar, if you haven't already, April 23rd and 24th. Those are the 2 dates for the final community forum. We have a very robust agenda for those 2 days of discussions and dialogue. We'll be bringing in globally or internationally known speakers, national, state, and local individuals to talk about the future of rising seas in Nantucket and what we might find in terms of best practices from other communities and nations even to implement in this National Historic Landmark island. So the purpose of the Resilience Toolkit is really to provide information to the community on flood risk in general, why you should have some sense of urgency on addressing issues of flood risk, and that also relates to concerns for erosion and sea level rise, as well as extreme storm events. Disaster preparedness and recovery, something we unfortunately can never get too much information on. The importance of preparing by minimally having flood insurance, whether you live in a flood zone or not. If it rains, it has a chance to flood. We've seen that case with extreme precipitation and heavy snows causing flooding in Nantucket. Importantly to the HDC and the Historic Commission is adaptation for historic properties and cultural resources, And then finally, additional information on sustainability and resilience. We hope to be working more aggressively on the nexus of those as we move forward, but they can be interrelated. There are also resources on personal preparedness for families, businesses, individuals. And it's something I want to stress, because this is something that is being stressed by FEMA as it is pulling grant funding for preparedness to a higher level of support for individual communities. They are looking at what we call whole community support. It's important, obviously, that we understand where the flood zones are, where our special flood hazard areas are in Nantucket, but the entire island itself, the whole community is at risk. We've heard time and time again about the lack of access to and from the Steamship Authority wharfs. And we really need to know that getting around the island, getting access to mid-island getting access to the rest of the island is critical. So whole community is really about all of those organizations, individuals, institutions, and government entities that are involved in preparedness planning. So the organization of the toolkit runs from the federal down to the individual level. And that is because so much of the technical support, of the regulatory guidance, of the funding can come via federal government down through the states to the localities, to the individual property owners, and then the individuals. So you see the breakout of government agencies, funding sources, and then research. Research is critical because of the fact that, I think I may just have lost the presentation. Can you all still see the presentation or not?
No, there was something going on with it, Lisa.
Okay, let
maybe
me
you
get,
can bring it back up again.
yeah.
There were some
maybe,
blocks that were shown.
Oh, really? Okay, let me get rid of my grid view here if I can. Thank you for that, Holly.
Yes, I think it's the grid view that's in the way.
Okay. I'm gonna have to eliminate that. You can see most of it though, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let me get it
Yes.
back to full screen again. Okay, is that good?
There's part of it on the top.
Yeah, I know. I've had this issue before, so I think you'll see all the content though. So I'll make sure that
Perfect.
gets corrected later. So at any rate, this is the direction we're going with federal, state, local, property owner, and individual level. We're dealing with research, technical assistance, planning, resources for funding these types of efforts, and then breaking down into particular resources of value to real estate, residential, commercial, and then finally the individual. What do I need to know about adaptation mitigation? Where am I? Where is my property that is on some of the flood maps? And then how do I develop my own preparedness plan? Then lastly, the appendices include information on flood insurance, a Q&A. What does it mean to have or not have flood insurance? The Resilience Glossary, a lot of the terms that we use in the toolkit and that we continue to hear over and over are necessary for an understanding of the toolkit as well as the design guidance that will come forward. And then obviously there are a variety of flood maps out there and resources for accessing information about flooding. So we have some appendices that's referencing that. And again, those types of maps will need to be continually updated as the research and the work, for example, through Arcadis moves forward, as well as that through the state. Some of the federal tools, we start in preservation with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, because the Section 106 process of the National Historic Preservation Act does play a role when you may propose and undertake with federal funding or licensing and permitting any type of major structural improvements to the town's ability to adapt or mitigate. So they do play a critical role when we're looking at major infrastructure projects. But also they have areas that they provide information on sustainability and climate resilience and how some of their federal, state, and even local partners are addressing those issues within historic preservation work. Also, the Environmental Protection Agency has a resource center that includes a lot of data and information specific to New England and Nantucket, and even information about climate-ready estuaries. Also, the Federal Emergency Management Agency has funding resources available. BRIC is a new program that we hope this coming year that the town of Nantucket will be able to apply for through the state hazard mitigation office to secure funding to implement some of that work that may be coming out of the Coastal Resilience Plan, for example. FEMA also has just volumes of information on historic structures, floodplain management, on hazard mitigation planning, both for towns and individuals, and on mapping flood risks, not to mention what I'll talk about later, technical bulletins. In terms of the organizations that we work most closely with in preservation, the National Park Service and the National Center for Technology and Training. I would say, Holly, I'm just going to stop for a minute and say, if there are any questions during the presentation, if you can call me out on it, just because I can't see any of the gallery view at this point. So if folks do raise their hands, please stop me. And I'm glad to answer questions along the way.
Absolutely.
Okay. The National Park Service has done an immense amount of work on this. When we think about national parks, it's not just about recreational opportunities and all those wonderful national historic sites and parks we have a chance to visit. We operate under the National Park Service's guidance. That is where historic preservation sits at the federal level. And they have done a terrific job in the past 8 years or so of trying to address issues of climate change, not only in national parks and at national historic sites that the Park Service must manage, but also providing guidance to communities like the town of Nantucket, the state of Massachusetts even, on how to look at climate change and the implementation of adaptation and mitigation activities within a cultural resource area. There's currently guidelines available on flooding adaptation for historic buildings. We're taking a strong amount of guidance from that and developing Nantucket's guidance. And those come directly from the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and the treatment of historic buildings. NCPTT, the National Center for Technology and Training, Preservation Technology and Training, actually has done some really interesting work on cultural landscapes. And I think Holly and I have repeated this term with you all over and over again, something we hope to see come out of the next phases of work, developing a cultural landscape assessment and survey for the island. And the other important thing, this came out of the natural disaster that was Katrina. NCPTT came in and did a condition assessment and developed tools for recovery, how to collect data and information post-disaster that would help in the rebuilding and protection or greater preservation when possible of historic assets. In terms of the state of Massachusetts and the tools that are available that we reference in the guidance, there's a coordinated statewide emergency preparedness planning effort. It specifically addresses climate change. As well, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation has a statewide climate change adaptation plan. And of course, I think we're most familiar with the coastal zone management, which interprets things like the FEMA flood maps in coastal zones. Much more information. This is just a sampling of what is in the toolkit and referenced from the state of Massachusetts resources. And then lastly, and again, important to us, is the Massachusetts Historical Commission. We work very closely, obviously, in Nantucket with Mass Historical, and very pleased to hear you all are moving forward with certified local government status. Hopefully it will funnel down some resources that will be important to you as you move forward with other components of Resilient Nantucket. They have a cultural resource information system. The historic rehabilitation tax credit needs to be more promoted as a tool for sustainability and resilience. So I hope in future public outreach and education opportunities, we have the chance to show how the federal historic rehabilitation tax credit in particular, as well as the Mass Historic Tax Credit, the state level tax credit, have been used in adaptation. There's a page that talks about projects that have been funded, so that may be a good learning source. And then obviously the state preservation plan, which does mention in many locations the issue of climate risk and how historic preservation can be incorporated. Local government, there are many, many tools available. We've made sure Holly has that everything that's been presented as part of the Resilient Nantucket has been provided as a resource for you all, as well as members of the public, including some of the last presentations we had done, having speakers both from the state and from the region talk about adaptation examples and how grants can be used. Also, there are other resources available in terms of things like how do public officials talk about flood risk? How do they communicate to the members of their community? And this came up in a previous conversation with the CRAC, actually, and it wasn't something I was, talking about then. But thinking about it later, it is so critical for our community officials, that would be agency heads, staff, as well as members of the select board, to know what are the right tool, or what's the right terminology, how do we best communicate as officials with the community. There's a great resource for that and how to start that process off. And then other things like, building community resilience with nature-based solutions. FEMA has some great publications, the Risk Map program, to talk about how communities can layer mitigation and adaptation strategies, nature-based, along with more non-structural adaptation approaches to individual buildings. And then coming soon, obviously, building with Nantucket in mind, designing for adaptation guidelines, which will focus obviously on how best to look at elevating resources within the town of Nantucket's National Historic Landmark districts, but also how to just look at other adaptation strategies, flood-proofing buildings, barriers, and the like, to minimize the impact of flooding. And then lastly, so many cultural institutions in Nantucket need to have an emergency plan, whether it's museums, cultural organizations, civic institutions. One of the best resources I've come across so far is an online planning tool that was developed by the Museum of Information, the Museum of Information Library Services, as well as the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. This toolkit, D-Plan, is a great resource and something that the town could actually partner with its museum association museums to complete. Other key tools, starting with local tools that are useful for government as well as the commissions. For residential property, there's a number of resources available that have been provided by FEMA. Protecting building utility systems from flood damage. The very first thing that you can do is raise those utilities out of the flood hazard areas. looking at homeowners guides to retrofitting. Now, keeping in mind that some of this guidance is not going to perhaps work for buildings that are trying to retain their historic character. It's a balance, but at the same time, there is useful information in there about how you can rehabilitate a property to make it less prone to flooding in the future. And I advise that it would be a useful document for the commission members to review as well, in parallel with the design guidance that Bill will be providing. And then lastly, again, similarly, reducing flood risk to residential buildings that cannot be elevated. You can actually see some historic buildings, row houses in the bottom right corner there. So there are tools that can be used to minimize risk, and it's important for us to be knowledgeable about those so we can share that information with property owners. In regards to businesses and commercial property owners, there is a lot of information now out there on various websites, whether it's Department of Homeland Security, whether it's the Small Business Administration, or whether it's nonprofit organizations that provide assistance for historic property owners, or for property owners in general, whether they're residential or commercial, about how to be better prepared and how to reopen in a prepared and informed way. So there are toolkits available, there are websites, there is disaster loan assistance. I want to underscore this. The Small Business Administration not only has disaster funding available post-natural disaster for businesses, it is also available for homeowners. So keep that in mind, that the resources that are out there are very broad, and having this information in the toolkit, and maybe even doing an educational presentation to the community about post-disaster financial assistance would be a great help to both historic property owners and non-historic property owners. The last thing that I think is becoming more and more important, and more of our national organizations such as the Urban Land Institute are researching this, is climate risk and real estate. Making smart development decisions, both in the issue of location of new development and the types and uses of new development, is critical to protecting the property values and the economics of a local tax base. So this report just came out, sponsored by the Urban Land Institute, and we will be seeing more and more publications about climate risk, real estate, and what towns need to know about these important critical economic issues before they approve projects. In regards to the individual level, everything from the American Red Cross to Centers for Disease Control to FEMA, Department of Homeland Security, and then even at the state level, Kim has done a great job of mining through some of the state resources and found something from the Massachusetts Office of Disability on emergency preparedness for those that are disabled. We again need to ensure that first and foremost, our own personal safety, our family safety is paramount in disaster preparedness. And so there are many tools available out there, and I strongly encourage everywhere I work for, first, you should have your own emergency plan. Everyone on this particular meeting should have a individual or family preparedness plan in place for themselves. Then we work on our properties and our towns. In terms of research, we wanted to include some information for people who are interested in seeing more and more best practices in things like flooding adaptation or elevation. What is the National Trust, for example, on the far right image, doing through its Preservation Leadership Forum to educate professionals in the field, to educate commission members, historic homeowners about the topic. The National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, which you are now a member of because of your participation in CAMP, the Community Assistance and Mentoring Program. There are many publications that address issues of how communities are dealing with flooding, climate change, mitigation, adaptation through their built environment. Strong Towns is a leader in small community planning, and I've become a member of that organization. They've recently put out a piece on why localism matters in a disaster. And then, of course, we've got flood damage resistant materials requirements that FEMA has put out. Again, these technical notes, not just publications from FEMA, are ever-changing, evolving based on issues that come up with every single natural disaster and flooding event we have. So many resources there that are in the toolkit for additional research. Modeling and visualization, I just throw out there, it's the last item on the list, but a very timely one. You continue to have a terrific partnership with the University of Florida, the Preservation Institute, Nantucket, on resiliency and 3D digital documentation and visualization tools. So that I know will be continuing over the years here, and it's a great resource to help with both storytelling, showing people outside of the 2D imagery, the 3D imagery of what flooding potentially could look like or sea level rise could look like as we move into 2100. But importantly, we have all of the science that we have to date and the technology from the Army Corps, FEMA, NOAA. They are mapping diligently. And again, this is something that through the Coastal Resilience Plan we'll continue to see fine-tuning and updates of these types of maps. Whether it is looking at coastal erosion hazard maps through the state of Massachusetts, which we know will be updated, looking at the risk zone map through Surging Seas, which is Climate Central's tool. These are all things that are available to the public to view, to understand more the threats of what future conditions are anticipated to bring. And then of course you can't have maps without charts. So here is one of the most recent up-to-date charts that NOAA has for observed water levels at Nantucket. Obviously you can see the predictions and then you see the observed. It always seems I look at these charts and the observed is always that much higher than the predictive models. But this again are resources that are available to you and to the public. And then lastly, the last few things in the addendum to the toolkit. Again, why is flood insurance important? We have a Q&A about the National Flood Insurance Program and supplemental flood insurance with a few questions answered. An important thing many community members, property owners don't realize, your normal homeowner's insurance does not typically cover flooding. So again, why flood insurance is important, particularly in the case of a disaster. You have two properties next to each other. One of those property owners is part of the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, has flood insurance. The other one doesn't. The one property owner may qualify for up to $250,000 of post-disaster flood assistance through the NFIP. The other equally hit property owner may get upwards from what I've understood from FEMA between $3,000 and $4,000 just for relocation expenses post-disaster. So again, it's maybe worth the investment if you are a property owner. Our Resilience Glossary addresses primarily 4 different areas that we speak to throughout the toolkit. Resilience planning in general, historic preservation, natural resources, and disaster preparedness. So we've included terminology and typical uses of terms like adaptation, reconstruction, which is a preservation specific term, estuarine areas, and whole community. Again, these are all terms that are used within these different fields. And as we move forward, we will be using and incorporating more of these terms in the glossary as we get input from all of you. So that concludes the presentation. I am glad to take questions. I'll go ahead and stop share here so I can see all your faces at this point, but glad to pull it up if I need to refer to anything else. So questions, comments, I'm open to any thoughts you may have.
Anybody have any questions? Thoughts?
I know it's a fairly comprehensive list, and we went through
Oh, that
on
was
this
a lot.
I know, like what?
I just from the HDC, we had a project the other day. We have very sensitive areas, as you know, all around the island, and swimming pools are quite a new. There are just a lot of them going in, and I think some of the areas I just don't. I wish we had a leg to stand on, and I don't know if you can address that, but the idea of developing these sort of fragile developments that are sort of on dunes with swimming pools and excessive building does that come under any of those topics that you?
Well, very timely question, Abby. So one of the speakers that we're going to be having in April, and I'll give him a heads up about this because he may have some information for you to share. And then I have my own experience in Annapolis with swimming pools. So, my heart goes out to you. There is great sensitivity in some of our coastal historic areas to the protection of dunes, that they are recognized as a cultural resource and as it relates to the environmental setting of a community, its properties, its landscape in which historic buildings or structures are located. Bill Dyke is the Coastal and Marine Advisor to the National Trust of the UK. He has just completed a study of zones within the properties that they own in the UK, and that's a significant amount. Over 10% of the United Kingdom's coastline is owned and managed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation UK, which has both a natural and a cultural heritage mission. So that might be worth some reading, and I'm happy to make sure, Holly, you have a copy of that in case your commission members are interested. Now, all that said, I come back to the best way for the HGC to have substantial, credible backup to decisions or concerns you may express is to complete a cultural landscape survey of the island. So you understand those areas that are environmentally important, intact, fragile, should be sensitively considered both by the CONCOM, by the HDC in making decisions. So that would be a very helpful tool for you to eventually have. On the swimming pool front, I can't imagine that CONCOM doesn't have something that they provide. I know our situation in Annapolis was similar. We worked hand in glove with our critical area planner, which would be your conservation planner as well, because of the fact that we had concerns for archaeological resources that could be found in the excavation for swimming pools, particularly in undisturbed areas. So that was a hook that we had. We required a phase 1 assessment be completed in that area for significant disturbance. And then secondly, with us, it was more an issue of aesthetics. It wasn't as if we had the ability to prevent swimming pools on private property. It was more, what was the aesthetic issues beyond potential impact for archaeological resources. So that's how we addressed it. So a couple
Oh, I lost you there.
Yeah, I think mine is a bit unstable too. I don't know. It's a global issue today. Wait
It's
for
a
a few more days. We may be having even more problems. So, you know. But
Lisa, can I ask you a question?
yes, Diane.
The other day, day before yesterday, I took a questionnaire that was put out. I don't know whether it was by the Florida people or what, saying that they were going to have a meeting and they were going to discuss all this stuff about what we wanted to see downtown, how we, the people, wanted to protect the buildings in the flood area and stuff like that. Was that a questionnaire that you put out, or was it somebody else?
I see Kimberly. Can you tell me, Kim?
Yeah, so that survey was for the Envision Resilience Nantucket Challenge done by Remain, and it was created in partnership with Acclimate Nantucket, which I'm coordinator of, which is a public-private partnership for the holistic adaptation and communication of climate change for Nantucket.
Right.
And so it was done within partnership of the Acclimate partners and Remain Nantucket.
Two things I had, if I might just bring up. Recently, I talked to a reporter on the INM, and he said, how do we get this sort of sideline information out to the public so they know what's going on? And I said, what you have to do is put a section in the paper that says the HDC is doing this, the conservation is this, so that people can read it. They're not going to look it up and go to that trouble. But it's important that we get this history and all these questions out, because otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. So I would like to just say that we really need information to have people join the thing and to do the questions and to give their opinions, because like in regards to that pool, we're sort of, the HTC is sort of stuck because zoning wise, and the rule that says if you can't see it, it's okay. But this is at the end of Smith's Point, which is a moving sand dune. How do we pass laws, or what do we do? Does the Conservation Commission join us in these meetings that we're having? I think that the places that, and they are continuing with the application, it's in a dune swept. When I first came here, when you went out to Smith's Point, there was a parking lot, a paved parking lot. And the dune on the left-hand side was 10 or 12, 15 feet tall. It's gone. That whole thing is gone. And you dig a hole to put a pool in, you are disturbing the dune. So when does the dune win over the pool? That's my question, I guess.
Diane, I think that's a really valid point, and I'm so glad Trevor's on the call, because this is going to be in his camp to really address some of these natural resource issues. You know, dunes are a moving, you know, just like any landscape. I mean, landscapes do change over time, but understanding that setting and ensuring that we minimize man's impact on that natural landscape that is so distinctively Nantucket is what we have to think about. And as well as you, and again, I know I hit this heavy, but two of the major standards, Secretary of Interior Standard 9 and 10, talk about the environmental setting, that the integrity of a resource also includes its environmental setting. So that's why natural heritage and cultural heritage are so important to me. On the question of communicating to the public, I think it's really important to understand that, and it was a lesson learned for me in working on coastal or cultural resource hazard mitigation planning in Annapolis. The number one easiest lift for adaptation alternatives is public awareness and education, constant public awareness. And it can be done, Diane, through meetings like this, you know, you could put a 10-minute slot in some of the HDC meetings and ask staff perhaps to do a review of, you know, one of the publications or something that's relevant. You could bring in a guest speaker, you know, whether it's the NHC, the HDC, the CONCOM, you have that ability, that open ability as commissioners. And that was one thing we did start doing in Annapolis. We had somebody come and speak on a topic that would be informative and helpful to the HDC. Other than that, it really is working with Acclimate and your other partners to hopefully incorporate and strategically develop a program of communication for over the year that will achieve your mutual goals. So it is a lift. You have to develop a communication plan, and I think that the opportunity may then exist with the town to help in coordinating that effort, you know, in the long term. So not everything has to be done today or tomorrow, but do look at some 5-year goals you want to achieve. That may be one.
Oh, thank you very much.
Appreciate that. I hope the commissioners will, after hearing you and then hearing Trevor, see how these two projects really are working together. So with that, I'll introduce to you all Trevor Johnson from Arcadis on the Coastal Resiliency Plan.
Oh, you cut out there at the end. Did you introduce me there, Holly? Sorry, I missed it.
I did. So
okay.
Sorry, my internet might be also spotty. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here today for this focused, I think, and dedicated conversation to climate resiliency or coastal resiliency and its impact on the built and natural environment of Nantucket. I'm going to share my screen in a moment here and walk through what is about a 20-minute presentation that introduces the Coastal Resilience Plan, our team, what the process is going to look like, and then happy to take any questions from the Commission. Before jumping in, allow me to just introduce myself quickly. So my name is Trevor Johnson. I am the project manager of the Coastal Resilience Plan with the firm Arcadis. Arcadis is a design and engineering consulting firm based globally in the Netherlands. So we're a Dutch company, but we have a very large presence here in the United States as well. One of our areas of expertise and specialization is really around this question of resilience and water management, harkening back to our roots in the Netherlands and their obvious need to manage water, very significantly from the origins of that country. So we work with communities across the United States on working together to try to address the challenges that are confronting us due to climate change and sea level rise. And my background actually is not in engineering, but in planning. So I've worked mostly in New England, spent some time in New York on this focused on resilience planning issues. But I'd also note that my background is actually in historic preservation as well. I spent some time working for the National Trust for Historic Preservation and worked as an archaeologist for a while and have a master's degree in historical archaeology. So the issues of historic preservation and the needs and the values associated with it are certainly near and dear to my heart, and hoping to bring that to this project as well. So with that probably too long introduction, let me just share my screen here. And can someone let me know if they can see the slide or if they can see the notes portion of my slide deck here?
We got you in full presentation mode.
Full presentation mode, fantastic. All right, so what we'll cover today, the objectives are just to provide an overview of the Coastal Resilience Plan project team, process and scope, clarify what we think is needed to ensure a successful project, and then to seek input from you all on the town's coastal resilience concerns and opportunities. Our project team really starts with the town and our what we're thinking of as our steering committee, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. So we're working very closely with Vince and his colleagues across the town departments, and then with our citizen leaders on the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. We'll be presenting to them I think 4 or 5 more times over the course of this project. We presented and had a conversation with them on Tuesday of this week, and we'll actually return during their next meeting in 2 weeks to provide sort of an update on how things have advanced since this week. And our project team is led by Arcadis, but we have a very multidisciplinary group of sub-consultants or partners really that are working with us. The Craig group, led by Lisa and Kim, are a part of our team. So it's an excellent opportunity to share resources and knowledge that come out of the Resilient Nantucket project and really fold them into the Coastal Resilience Plan, because you know, these are 2 sides of the same coin and really need to be highly coordinated and aligned in terms of recommendations as we move through the coastal resilience planning process. We also have STOSS, which is a landscape architecture and planning firm focused on resilience and really the kind of environmental and ecological issues that come along with climate change. And then One Architecture, which is a New York City-based architecture and urban design firm that also a Dutch company or based in the Netherlands, focused on resiliency for the built environment. Our team principles. So we kind of approach this project by starting with, you know, the values and the principles that we look to operationalize through our work. So the first, and this will be relevant to this group, is honoring community heritage and identity through adaptation. We do, you know, appreciate the degree to which Nantucket is a special place and that it is uniquely cherished by those who live and visit there, and that planning, you know, for coastal resilience is not like planning on Nantucket, I should say, is not like planning for coastal resilience anywhere else, and that the solutions that we devise really need to be tailored to the unique conditions found on the island, whether they be environmental or related to the built environment and the historic character of the community. Addressing resilience at multiple scales. So we are looking at everything from building scale solutions and approaches all the way out to sort of larger district scale or environmental scale solutions. Inclusive and responsive stakeholder engagement. We feel that really the backbone of the process is stakeholder engagement, and that's very much why I'm here today. We're in the process of wrapping up our first stint of engagement, talking to boards, commissions, and some of the key nonprofit groups around the island in this earliest phase of the project that we're in now. And then finally, the commitment to implementation. Virtually everything we do throughout this process, including the engagement, is targeted towards developing recommendations and tools that are really implementable. So trying to make sure that what we bring to the table equips the town with what it needs to immediately move forward. This is just a quick photo of our team, members of our team during a visit November 12th of last year. That's Vince standing there. He led an excellent 2-day tour for us, and we certainly saw all the sights and the weather conditions that Nantucket has to offer. So I'll just give a brief project overview now. So the Coastal Resilience Plan, again, the goal of the project is to develop a comprehensive plan, so that is island-wide, to address coastal flooding, sea level rise, and erosion. The process includes the identification of community assets and infrastructure, identification and mapping, I should say, assessing vulnerabilities and risks that are posed by coastal flooding and erosion, identifying actions to reduce those risks, and then finally developing a detailed, prioritized resilience and adaptation action plan. We have developed a mission statement for the project, and this statement is really intended to ground every conversation we have in a mutually held understanding of what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So I think in the interest of time, I won't read it here, but if you do attend upcoming public engagement meetings, we will have that there. It's also posted on the Coastal Resilience Plan website. And I do encourage you to just take a look at it and make sure that we kind of understand what it is that the project is trying to address. And on that note, our work is multifaceted and will include a number of different kinds of sort of steps. The first element of our scope is really an analysis of risk. And as mentioned before, we are looking at comprehensively at risk. So coastal flooding and storm surge, coastal erosion, and then sea level rise and its impacts on both coastal erosion and coastal flooding. The scale of investigation is island-wide, so we're looking at the whole island, including the sister islands. We're looking across scales at built infrastructure, critical infrastructure, and natural resources, and then also at the interdependencies between these systems and infrastructure that really make up their function and value to the community. And then around solution development, we're starting with and really evaluating the widest possible toolkit of resilience and risk mitigation options, from more traditional flood defense infrastructure to nature-based solutions, to policy and regulatory tools, to guidance and education, with the recognition that a lot of the property, most of the property on Nantucket is privately held, and part of the resilience building process here will necessitate equipping property owners with the information and tools that they need to protect themselves. And I know Lisa also touched on that during her presentation as well. Our tasks, we've broken the project into 5 tasks. We are underway with the first 3. Underway or concluded, I should say. So the sort of data gathering task or phase has concluded. We are well underway with stakeholder engagement and underway with the hazard assessment and risk and vulnerability assessment. And this is how those tasks lay out over our project schedule. So obviously we're currently in mid-January now. The milestone there is, or the star that indicates a milestone there, is our upcoming community open house that's scheduled for January 28th, rapidly approaching at 5:30. Look for more information on the town's website and other sources very soon on that. If anybody is interested, I can share out the RSVP link after this call. We're very interested in getting as many members of the community there as possible. So please tell your friends, neighbors, colleagues about it and encourage them to attend. It will be a virtual meeting held on Zoom. And then stakeholder engagement, of course, extends throughout the entire process. In mid-March, in March, I should say, we'll be finalizing our risk and vulnerability assessment that will lead into the mid-project report that we'll deliver to the town. And then that will lead into our scenario development, and then finally the development of our final deliverables and plans. A little bit more on the engagement here. We've broken it into phases. We're concluding now what we called a listening tour. So as I mentioned, we've met with, I think at this point, 18, and by the time we finish it, maybe about 20 town departments and groups having hour-long conversations where we're really there to hear what the group has to say. We want to understand what their mission critical priorities are, what they see as the most significant risks facing Nantucket, lessons learned from previous planning processes, really trying to download as much of that information to our team as possible during this initial phase. And that's similarly the focus of our first public workshop, which will be around visioning and developing a mutually held understanding of the risks that Nantucket is facing and what is the long-term vision for how Nantucket wants to address those risks over the coming 80 years. And then subsequent phases of our engagement will look at refining our preliminary recommendations, and then finally planning around implementation. So making sure that the community is empowered to carry the work forward once the process is complete in September of this year. Obviously, Nantucket has done a substantial amount of work, including as recently as last year and the year before with the hazard mitigation plan and the coastal risk assessment and resiliency strategies. It's a great foundation for us to build from. So we've reviewed most, if not all, of these documents and are using them as kind of our launching pad for this process. Where we are very much looking to, advance that work and not duplicate or disrupt other efforts that are happening. I think it's certainly a benefit that, Lisa is undertaking the project that she's working on, focused on the historic assets, and also that we have other work that's going on and has gone on that can assist us. This slide lists some of the questions that we're asking ourselves as we undertake this process, and these questions that we ask ourselves inform what it is that we will what we will actually be providing to the town and the analyses that we'll be undertaking. So what are the shared challenges and opportunities, the conflicts and tensions that need to be resolved? What information and recommendations from prior studies can we carry forward, and conversely, which may need to be reassessed? What are the most urgent needs to reduce risk? What do decision makers and key stakeholders need to be able to move forward immediately? Key gaps in knowledge and understanding, and how can we address those key gaps? How do we help advance and catalyze efforts and investment? And then what are the kind of low-hanging fruits, the obvious things that need to be done? And then finally, I think, I often say that resilience is about more than risk reduction. It's not simply mitigating a risk that has been identified. It's really about developing projects that add social, economic, and ecological value and improve quality of life in Nantucket. So we are looking for solutions that align with the values of the community and that are really co-beneficial, so that we're providing certainly a benefit in terms of reduced risk, but also other kinds of recreational, economic, ecological value as well. The consultant team that I'm working with is really at the core of a much larger nested structure that's kind of visualized on this slide. So we work very closely with Vince and his colleagues in the Natural Resources Department, pretty much in communication on a daily basis. We are working closely with the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee as our steering committee. And then just beyond that, the information flows from town boards and committees such as the HDC. And then finally, the general public. And indeed, the information flow flows in both directions. So we are providing information out to the community, and the community is providing information to us. And we're all working together here to develop the plan. And so we really want everybody to be able to see themselves, not just in the final product, but also in the process itself, and for each and every member of the community to feel that they have a role to play in making the plan a successful. This is very much Nantucket's coastal resilience plan. A little bit more about the community engagement approach, because again, this is the backbone of the project, and we think it's vitally important that people understand how we're going to be communicating and working with them throughout the process. And for bodies like the HDC, which really serve a leadership function in the town, we are looking for your partnership in helping to get the word out and helping to provide input and engagement across this process. We have, as I mentioned, already spoken to a number of groups. We've heard a lot. I think just to summarize this slide a little bit, we understand that we want to be using the latest climate science and robust technical analysis. So engagement is an important input to our process, but the other side of that coin is technical analysis and sort of objective truth. And so we will be bringing both of those kind of approaches and perspectives to the table, which isn't to say that involving extensive community engagement is not important. In fact, it is, and we've been hearing a lot about how important it is to bring people to the table that may not have been engaged in prior planning efforts. So That includes, seasonal and year-round residents, but also a number of other members of the community who may not be involved in what's being led by the town historically. Again, leading to clear, actionable, and prioritized solutions, comprehensive in scope. We want to be looking at both built and natural resources and built and natural solutions, as well as policy and regulatory changes. Providing detailed guidance on implementation, including near-term pilot projects, the recognition that pilot projects can help catalyze and sort of prove the concept of certain solutions that may have some uncertainty associated with them. Co-beneficial infrastructure, I mentioned that before. And then finally, honoring and protecting the unique built and natural heritage of Nantucket. We have principles that are informing our engagement approach. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, very much about bringing people to the table and providing information that is accessible and clear. I think this is a challenge for us in a place like Nantucket where there's a lot of local experts and people who have been involved in these conversations for decades. And so, we want to meet those people, those members of the community where they're at, and provide a forum for detailed, focused conversation. But we also want to provide an opportunity for people to learn and feel comfortable communicating and learning about resiliency issues, even if this is their first time engaging on the topic. Fostering optimism and energy. Obviously, there is a lot going on in the world right now, and for the last little while. And I think it's, climate change is one of the pieces that I think gives people fear and can be rather pessimistic to talk about. We prefer to take an approach that is more optimistic and thinks about what we can do about it. What can we do both to mitigate the effects of climate change or mitigate future climate change, but also how can we increase resilience to changes that are already going to happen or that may occur in the future. Co-creation, this is all about what I mentioned before, working with the community, not just for the community. So we want to be building capacity and developing our approach and our solutions in a way that is truly collaborative. And then obviously in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, really making sure that we're adhering to public health and safety guidance. And so all of our engagement, unfortunately, for the near term, if not the project duration, will be virtual and fully social distance and safe. I won't read this slide, but this is just kind of our engagement goals. Our community engagement plan, which is a longer document, which outlines the entire community engagement approach, is available on the Coastal Resilience Plan website. And so I would encourage those who are interested to check that out. We want to just be fully transparent about our engagement approach from the get-go, and that's very much what that's about. I think this is a helpful slide just to kind of understand what our approach attempts to do, which is reaching both broad and deep outreach. Broad outreach means engaging as many people as we possibly can with maybe a lesser level of engagement. So fewer touch points, maybe not as in-depth a conversation with each individual, but we're making sure that as many people are able to be engaged. And you have a toolkit associated with that might include community-wide open houses, as well as digital technologies and surveys. Then we have kind of approaches that are associated with a deeper level engagement with people in groups that really will be integral to the implementation, to the success of the process and the implementation of the plan. And so many of those people and groups are the ones that we're talking to through this phase one of community engagement. I think Lisa mentioned the number of stakeholders on the island. This is a select list of the stakeholders that we're tracking and looking to have involved in the process. A lot of these groups we've already spoken to, and those that we haven't, we'll continue to reach out to. And this is just on the phase one group listed on the left side of this slide are all the groups that we've talked to so far, including yourselves. and there will be more as we move through this process. I mentioned the toolkit before. This is just a kind of a snapshot of the different ways in which we can look to engage the community. I think one of the lessons that we've taken from this year of virtual living, let's say, is we've undertaken other projects where the engagement had to move entirely online, and certainly that poses challenges. It also has opportunities. Some people feel that it's easier to engage in a virtual meeting than to walk or drive down to a physical meeting. But at the same time, it can be more challenging to really get that meaningful input, have a meaningful conversation. So what we want to do is provide lots of different ways of engaging. So whether that's virtual meetings, one-on-one interviews, the public open house, different digital ways to engage, just email. There are ways to communicate, and we want to make sure that those ways to communicate are people are aware of them and feel comfortable doing so. And yeah, I did just mention the website. Please do check out the Coastal Resilience Plan website. A lot more information on there, and that'll be updated regularly throughout the process, or as regularly as we can manage. There's also there linked a short form that is really just a form to provide your contact information. We'd like to get a robust email list together so that we can make sure to keep everyone informed about project progress and upcoming events. And yes, schedule-wise, we are here in this sort of launch of phase 2 of the public engagement process. After that, I think we'll be kind of back of house for a while as we develop our mid-project report and continue to undertake our analyses before coming back out to the community in the spring to launch the preliminary recommendations. And on that note, yep, the next steps, community engagement, risk and vulnerability assessment that I mentioned, which will be detailed in our mid-project report. And then out of that, starting to develop our preliminary resilience and adaptation scenarios. So these are just some questions that we've been asking the folks that we've talked to during this first phase of engagement, really just trying to understand what your primary goals and objectives for the project would be, what legacy you'd like to see the project leave behind, and what would you really not like to see happen. And then critical elements, things that you think we absolutely need to know. Pitfalls that we should look out for. And then something that I think we really like to ask is, what solutions are on and off the table for you? Are there things that you just know right now are not gonna be acceptable to you or to the community? Which isn't to say we won't consider them and evaluate them, but it's helpful to know where public support may or may not lie at this phase of the project. So I will stop talking there, and unless Vince wants to add anything to this presentation, happy to take questions or comments.
Thanks, Trevor. Just to say that I added the link for the registration to the chat.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Vince. Any questions? I'm curious if there's any questions about the intersection of the project, the Resilient Nantucket project, and the coastal resilience planning process. How they work together, and what the path forward might be in terms of ensuring consistency there.
I have a question about the end result, less than the process.
Sure.
Just because is this all leading us to being able to make regulations for Nantucket as Nantucketers, not as Massachusetts or nationally? I'm just thinking of a specific FEMA regulation that the flood level plane of a building, if you're raising it, you have to go to a minimum height above the floodplain. That's a great tool for people to have something concrete to sort of have as your base. I'm thinking of the coastal resiliency and the project that Diane brought up earlier. it would be so nice to have a set rule that says, no, you can't build a pool where the dune has shifted so much in 10 years that it's not a recognizable area anymore. It's changed. There is still private property there, but in 10 years forward, we might have sand all over and in, you know, so I'm just wondering if this is getting us to some regulations that are basic to be able to say you can't do a pool there as a specific example. You can't lift a building in certain areas without getting to that floodplain level. So I'm looking for the end result of all this planning. I think it's great, but I want to know if it's going to be set in concrete, some good regulations and rules for Nantucket specifically.
Yes. So I think there's a couple different answers to the question. I would say it's certainly within our remit to recommend policy and regulatory changes to things like the zoning code that might regulate things like pools and other, you know, land use and the built environment. So we'll certainly be reviewing the existing zoning bylaw and making recommendations for how resilience goals and, you know, objectives can be implemented through those regulations. Obviously, recommended changes to bylaws need to be adopted by town meeting and so forth and reviewed by the attorney general. So that will not happen at the end of the CRP process, but the plan will recommend changes that can then be further evaluated and adopted by the, you know, the appropriate elected body.
Okay.
Trevor, if I might just add
Sure.
from the preservation front, I think there are opportunities you have as local decision makers on what it is you want to move forward for regulatory changes for Nantucket. I'll just speak to the preservation side of this. You can be stricter, for example, than the Secretary of Interior standards are, but you also have to, for example, I'll look at the floodplain management ordinance. Okay, that's back to your elevation question, Carrie. There is the option for exemption of historically designated properties, i.e. your contributing properties in your NHL district, from having to meet, in the instance of substantial improvement, you know, the elevation. However, I would also say that there is an in-between. I think you want property owners to be informed about their adaptation alternatives. Elevation may be the one that they're looking at because of requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program. You know, I want to not pay $25,000 a year for flood insurance if I adapt my building to the FEMA base flood elevation plus the 2 foot of freeboard or whatever the case may be at any given time in Nantucket. But on the other hand, you may want them to take advantage of tax credits that the state has that they may be able to use for the sensitive adaptation, elevation, design of that building? Or more importantly, are there other alternatives? Can they minimize and reduce their flood risk through barriers, through wet and dry flood proofing? So that's where property owners don't know what they don't know. And that's what I hope a more robust, maybe a second phase toolkit of materials and techniques for property owners could come out of this combined work of the Coastal Resilience Plan and Resilient Nantucket. Long answer, but yes, you have some ability to, in some instances, be stricter than.
Yeah, some guidelines or some advice pamphlet or something sounds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is Trevor talking about education and outreach. How do we continue the education even after the project has concluded?
Yeah. Thanks.
I think it's also important to remind everybody that we are in an NHL, and that actually has some benefits to that exemption you were mentioning, Lisa. And not many people realize that. And few and far between will get people that will submit for a historic determination to the commission. And usually it's because they're wanting to be exempt from one of those building codes. And that's where it would be, behoove people to look into that as an option of not having it to comply with the building code elevation requirements.
So could you define it, an HL? What is historic something? What's that?
Our National Historic Landmark.
Okay, so if when we're
So that
talking,
designation right there helps us.
right, okay. Yeah, I think from all of this, I haven't been able to concentrate. I've got two puppies over here, but like, I just want the town to be aware of what you have all talked about today when we're passing zoning laws and so forth. And I'm thinking about how could we get this to real estate agents so they know when they're selling something
Yes, Abby.
that they can say, this is a very sensitive area. Don't think this is what you've got. This is a dune. It's very fragile. Don't think you're going to put the trophy house here with the pool and the cabana and the so it's like the more public information we get out to who's making the decisions, I think it's so important. And I thank you guys because you're doing it must be very hard work to get this all together, making laws. And I wish it would, I wish we'd done this like 10 years ago because we could be saving our island.
Yes, because it seems like wherever there's gray areas, people push it. And to have regulations in place to say no, then people will accept a no answer because they'll push a gray, well, maybe. So it's interesting where this is going to go.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I do have to move to another meeting at 2:30 here. But I am more than happy to take questions via email or continue the conversation later on. During the January 28th public meeting would be one opportunity to do so. And I really, just to put another plug in for that, we're really looking for help getting the word out and making sure that we have good attendance there. So, yeah.
Trevor, I know you've got to go, but to that point, I was going to actually mention, and Vince and Holly, this is important for you. If we've got like a 1-paragraph explanation of that, getting it into, Acclimate's normal email newsletter and NPT's newsletter, all those great partners you've interviewed so far, it would be terrific to get them to have that information go out to their members, and then the link to the website where they can sign up for more information as it progresses. It's always so easy if you just say, here, just cut, paste, put this in for your email blast. So I'm sure Kim might be able to assist on our team side with giving you what you need. If that's
I'll email it. We have a flyer, a note, like a posting, an advertisement, and I'll email that to you, Kim, this afternoon, that just to share with Acclimate and any other networks on the island.
And also to point out that I know Trevor's under pressure for time. I can hang on and answer some questions in his place.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry to have to leave early, but I'm happy to take any questions via email or through Vince. So thank you again to everybody.
Thank you, Trevor. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Trevor. Well done.
Thank you.
So commissioners, didn't know if you had any other questions for Lisa, Kim, Vince. If not, I will definitely, I can be the person to provide their emails. Unfortunately, this is the way we have to communicate. Holly, but it looks like Diane has her hand up. Diane, you got a question? Diane, you're a chair, so we still need you here.
Yeah.
Holly, I'm going to leave, but I want to thank you guys for your help. This is so interesting, and it will give us a leg to stand on when we try to rationalize our denials.
Speaking of such things, as plans develop and as bylaws or recommendations for new bylaws or policies get put in place, would there be some scope to return to speak to this committee again, seek input, seek advice, even potentially approval, or get you to wave a banner for something?
I'd expect no less, Vince.
See you soon again.
You know, if my network connection was going to work, that was the time. And thank you all for the hard work you're doing.
Super. Happy to bring back things and see what people might agree with, what tweaks might be needed as policies develop over time.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Are we all set, Holly?
I think we are. I think on your end, you need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Carrie, did she ever make it back?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
All right, and Val? She was going, I think. Stephen?
Yeah, Val.
If you could hear me.
I hear you. And me too. So that we have everybody has gone for the adjournment. I will see you all on Tuesday night, right?
Yes. Yes.
And Holly, I'll give you a call. There's some information I would like to get about how to get that work kit and all that stuff, because there's so many places that he named or Lisa named today that I couldn't get them all written down. I'd like to know whether we have those written down somewhere that I could get them.
Both
Okay.
those PowerPoint presentations I have, so I can email them to you again.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
You're
everybody.
welcome.
Bye.
Thank you, NCTV. Bye.